honored to be here. I really do thank the entire OMG consortium, the UAF panel, you guys inviting me up here. One of the keys to successful keynote I found was to bring a prop. Now I realize as I kind of look at this that maybe stealing a propeller from my daughter was not the right answer to a prop, but it's still really fun to stand up on stage and do one of this and see who's awake. There you go. There you go. You won a free propeller. Knock yourself out. So that just, you never, I may have more, so watch out. Just got to keep you guys on your toes. What you guys don't see is the camera on me right now has this wonderful background where I'm just standing in front of the UAF grid. I'm just going to point over here and be like, well, let's talk about the strategic taxonomies, and I'm going to point over here. You guys don't know what it's all going on in the virtual space. You guys just have to live with me in the physical space. So my name is Daniel Hettema. I am the Director of Digital Engineering, Modeling, and Simulation. I know it says my name up there, but this brief really took a large group of people from my support team, Frank Salvatore, Emily Bach, to Dave McDaniels over at the CIO's office. There he is right there. To Jamie and some of the mission engineering team in the Undersecretary of Defense and R&D. So I have the privilege of standing up here, but this is not a Daniel solution. This really requires the whole team working together. If I know how to work PowerPoint. There we go. So one of the things I always like to kind of look at is using AI to ask interesting questions. If you sat into my talk yesterday about SysML, I asked the AI how to transition to SysML v2. So I asked the AI this time, how can an AI perform analysis on an architecture? And so this is how the AI felt like it could be used. Really, one of the things that I found interesting in this kind of response from the AI was the fact that in order to leverage AI, it's important to accumulate as much data as possible. And that to me is that key part. When we talk about this transition from DoDAF to UAF, the combining of NATO frameworks and things like that, it's really about being able to drive in and get data and models together. So hopefully one day we can use some AI to improve our efficiencies to really kind of gain some of that value down the road. A little bit right now still in just a fun toy, but I think there's potential that we can kind of keep working. So a little bit about where I sit in the federal government. So if you don't know the person all the way on the left, welcome from under your rock. That is the President of the United States. I am all the way on the right. In between me, we have a couple layers. The first being the Secretary of Defense. The second is the Undersecretary of Defense for R&E, Research and Engineering, Miss Heidi Hsu. Then my direct boss, Tom Sims, for the Executive Directorate for Systems Engineering and Architecture. And then finally myself as the Director of the Digital Engineering, Modeling, and Simulation. I've done the math. There's always the games of if this person leaves, this person becomes acting, and if this person leaves, that person becomes acting. I've done the math that if I ever find myself as acting Secretary of Defense, a lot has gone wrong. Now, I told that joke recently, and someone came up to me afterwards and was like, well, that'll be funny in 20 years when you're Secretary of Defense. And I said, we got a lot going weird if all of a sudden I'm Secretary of Defense. So that's my little fun jab. So I want to just kind of talk about what the Undersecretary of Defense for R&E kind of focuses on. So within R&E, there's kind of two parts of the portfolio. There's the research side and the engineering side. So first, let's talk a little bit about the research side. So the research side is broken out into 14 critical technologies. I'm convinced we did 14 because, well, we couldn't do 13. So therefore, we had to do 14. But you can see them kind of around the circle. You can go online and read about them on the CTO website, cto.mil. We, within the digital engineering community, do a lot of coordination with the integrated system of systems, the hypersonics, the space technology, and a little bit of directed energy. But obviously, modeling and simulation, and advanced computing and AI, we have coordination with from some of the modeling and simulation work. So there's a lot of great work going on in R&E really to build out these advanced technologies. as we think about how they apply to the Department of Defense and the broader federal government. So the other side of the R&E kind of sphere is the engineering activities. I like to break them out in kind of 4 key areas. The first is the systems engineering and architecture. That is where I sit within. The other one is the development test, DTE&A, development testing and evaluation organization that is led by Chris Collins. The TRMC, Test Resource Management Center. So they do all of the foundational parts of the ranges. That's kind of an interesting part that people don't really realize is within the scope of R&E, is we provide the foundation for like the computing and technology across all the test ranges in the United States. So when we think about things like White Sands Missile Range, a lot of the technology and power and all that comes out of the R&E budget. And then finally, mission engineering. And so I'll talk actually a little bit about them on my next slide here. So what is mission engineering? So we have our critical technologies. You saw that in the previous slide. They kind of come in. Mission engineering, this is not really to be an overview of mission engineering. I'm just trying to highlight that we have mission engineering. If you're interested in mission engineering, Jamie, raise your hand. That's the guy you want to go talk to. Okay, everyone go get your business cards, go run over to Jamie after. He's the guy you want to talk to when it comes to mission engineering. But at a high level within the OSD perspective, it stood up in 2017 when Congress directed us in the 2017 NDAA to go develop a mission engineering. 2020, there was the release of the mission engineering guidebook, which really tries to outline some of the key parts of what it means to do mission engineering. So taking capability gaps, looking at how those critical technologies come in, feeding that through, doing some complex system of systems analysis, and really trying to provide some information and recommendation. And so there's a strong partnership from the critical technologies and the mission engineering working together just to make sure that when technology starts getting elevated from tier 2 and 3, that there's actually supporting capabilities across the department to make it work. One of the things that we want to make sure we avoid is the valley of death. And so that way, great technology actually is able to be elevated, deployed rapidly, and has the supporting technology. So my direct boss is I'm within the executive directorate for systems engineering and architecture. Have a couple, I know, system engineers and gears. Where is Ryan Iguchi here? Where's Ryan? He normally loves just to count gears and tell me that they don't move. They don't move. I know that's an analogy at times for OSD. Thank you. But this is not my graphic. Have to steal graphics from others. We're working on that, having better graphics. And so, but what I want to highlight is some of the key roles that we have. So the first is systems engineering. So that is led by Miss Nadine Geyer. So she does a lot of work with the System Engineering Research Center. So that's kind of a big part of that portfolio, advancing the system engineering, including modular open systems and just systems engineering advancement. Digital engineering, modeling, and simulation, myself right here. Software engineering is the director is Alan Dianic. So he's really focusing on how do we advance the integration of systems engineering, software engineering, bringing those together in a kind of a DevSecOps approach. What does it mean to actually be doing model-based system engineering in support of software? How do we actually link some of those models? So that's really where he's really kind of building out that portfolio, advancing that mission as he works with the advanced computing people as we think about software-intensive systems. Specialty engineering is kind of the catch-all. That director is Mr. Chris DeLuca. He's focused on everything, all the abilities, for lack of a better word, reliability, maintainability, scalability. Right now, one of his big focus is, and this goes all the way up to the Undersecretary of Defense, actually, I think it was directed by Congress, because Congress runs our lives. The human harm mitigation. So there's a lot of questions around how we are designing systems and kind of the base management around reducing human harms. Obviously, some of that's been in the news recently around burn pits and things like that. So that's a big consideration that the specialty engineering is kind of working through. Policy and workforce is another key area that we have, which is actually led by Tom Sims, who's currently acting as my boss. So that is, so he's focused on all the guidance and policy across the system engineering and architecture portfolio and building out and working closely with DAU. And so Miss Yvette is in the back from DAU. Everyone say hi. So that strong coordination of building out that partnership. If you're in the federal government, you know that DAU went through a massive kind of restructure to be focused on kind of back to basics. So there's actually a whole engineering and technical management foundations, capability areas. So some of the cool stuff is the fact that they're incorporating more around digital literacy. There's some specifics in that kind of digital engineering realm of competencies at the level 3. This is not a whole brief about DAU. I'm sure Yvette can answer all your questions, but around things like digital ecosystem development, digital ecosystem sustainment, architectures through models. So a lot is going on as we kind of build out the foundational training across the department to advance that mission. So we're providing guidance, building out the training so we can hopefully keep pushing on the department and helping the services to do their job. Kind of moving through that bottom rung, we have the Defense Standards Program Office. That's really looking at all the standards and policies that the DoD does. That's run by Mr. Michael Heafy out of DLA. It's kind of a partnership on that one. A lot of interesting work when we think about the scale of the standards that the DoD manages and kind of what the changes are and how that all plays together. So that's some interesting work on that. And we get engineering architectures, which has actually just been renamed to the Joint Architecture for Capabilities and Systems. And so I'll talk actually a little bit about them a little bit later. But they're focused on kind of being a system of systems provider of trying to do a lot of the enterprise thinking to make sure that as systems get developed, they're adding that system of systems design flavor and ensuring success. And then engineering assessments really gets into some of that, like the ITRA work and things like that. So what is some of the vision for like digital engineering modeling and simulation, which is really where I'm trying to drive in. So the first one for me is that digital engineering, that the digital becomes that new norm. There is currently not a position in the DoD called Director of Computer, whose job it is to make sure we transition off the typewriter. My job, my hope is to work myself out of a job. So I don't want to have this position of digital engineering, Director of Digital Engineering, because that should just be the new norm. Engineers across the department, be it electrical and mechanical systems, working together in a kind of joint environment, sharing that data and driving is kind of that vision. And if I can get to that point and I don't have a job, I am okay retiring early and I don't know, writing a book. That's my plan. So data and information starts flowing across the life cycle, and that's really one of the hard parts that we're seeing. Is we talk a lot about the fact that there's great data in the training community. Well, often we don't find that data coming all the way back to the early acquisition phases. Well, how do we start getting some of that? How do we really influence that left side of the design process and actually incorporate a lot of that data? Had the privilege of talking with some of the kind of companies that do virtual models for training and support. And so the way that they are thinking about it from a training perspective of being able to put VR goggles on a pilot and actually having them work through in a simulator where they can now take what used to be 7 some odd like test flights. Well, they can take those physical test flights, do the first couple of them, and getting people used to the procedure section, doing that all in VR. So that way, by the time they're ready to actually put the pilot in the actual airplane, it's more they have the initial round of muscle memory in place. So that way, then it's just mostly focusing on that kind of the physical aspect of the fact that, okay, I need to do this step and this step with the realities of physics acting on the body. So that's really all something that we're working through. Powerful modeling and simulation visualization tools are used. That's one of my key areas. I really want to start seeing more visualization. We spend a lot of time as engineers building great models. I think that's great. Always, sometimes our models are not the right solution when we start visualizing them, especially up to senior leaders. I'm a big fan of not showing your homework to a senior leader. They don't need to see how well you do at your Fourier transforms. They just want to know whether or not you've answered their question with the right confidence. And so that's really about providing that visualization capabilities across the department. So using AI, hopefully for more than just what I used it for, actually using AI for kind of influencing our decisions. Have a close friend out in Idaho National Labs. They're really looking at how they can use an AI and a digital twin to act as a second alarm stage around a small nuclear reactor. So not necessarily to replace the human, but to be an additional guard to help the human, almost like some of that autopilot capabilities, where it's just doing a little bit more work, predicting ahead of going, wait a minute, something's not quite right. So that's really one where trying to apply AI and digital twins to this kind of approach is really critical across the entire acquisition federal government. So improve some outcomes. So I also like to use AIs for generating images. This is my other new thing that I've started doing because it's quicker than trying to go to my graphics people and be like, I need a picture of a person pressing a screen, and then I get a fun little graphic like that. So there you go, using AI, that's the future. So a little bit of some of my portfolio. So I have a lot of stuff going on right now. If I was to stand up here and walk you through each one of these things, Laura would not get to talk. And realistically, I'm more interested to hear what Laura has to say than some of my high level talking. So I'm just going to highlight kind of 3 key areas of the activities that I'm working on. But feel free to come talk to me if you have interest about any of these. More than willing to talk, have follow-on conversations with people about how R&E is kind of advancing the mission. So the first one we have is the draft DoD instruction, the 5,000, right now it's .us, for digital engineering. At the high level, it comes down and just says the PM is responsible for implementing digital engineering procedures as early as the project planning as possible. It's not as, I'm going to be honest, it's not as prescriptive as we probably would have liked, but the reality is we had to kind of deal with lawyers, and everyone loves a lawyer, and just some of the questions around funding. So, but it's a start in the right direction. We're trying to provide the policies necessary so that way the programs can start putting in the hooks across their acquisition and really making sure that we give them a policy hook for them to justify additional digital engineering funds to really advance their ecosystems and build out their modeling and simulation capabilities. The second big one I want to talk about is we're doing a SysML v2 transition guide. So this one actually we're working closely with the SysML v2 submission team led by kind of Sandy. And so what we're looking for is there's a lot of things outside of the scope of the SysML v2 transition, just by the pure language aspect of that. And so this is an opportunity for us in our OSD is to really hopefully pave some potholes as on the runway, so that way when the services really try going down that runway, we've at least cleared some of the potholes to enable the takeoff of V2 across it. So we're looking to be in sync with the V2 release from the submission team, really coordinating a lot with the services, with the community. We've actually taken some models, looking at taking all of that, answering some key questions. So we've actually developed, I think, 45-ish FAQs was the first round of the feedback of what is the transition, how does it look, and some of that story. And that's all part of what we're trying to provide. And so this will hopefully end up with a guidebook at the end that when services and really anyone in the community is looking to upgrade to SysML v2, that this can be part of their kind of references, so that way they can make decisions of what is the best way to adopt v2, because there's not going to be a single answer for any of this. Sometimes it's going to have to be, well, you may have to kind of go back and do a thing a certain way. You may need to go back and update some legacy models. You may choose to only do it with new start systems. So there's a lot of trade space in there that we're trying to capture and really provide that guidance back to the community. So my third big one is around the digital engineering body of knowledge. So this is a website that I sponsor We had an initial version on the DTIC platform that was locked behind a CAC card. The community came back to us and said, that doesn't help us. Not everyone has CAC cards. We agree. So we look to actually go on to a completely public approach. And so this is at a distro A, completely unclassified. We have a great governance board from NASA, the Department of Energy, DHS, all participating in kind of helping provide content and really bringing the players together and really being that foundation of sharing lessons, sharing successes, sharing the approaches so that we can elevate each other. Now, recognizing that it's good to have a distro A kind of thing. We're working on a roadmap where we'll actually do kind of an onion model, for lack of a kind of a better approach, where we take our unclassified layer, we add a CUI layer for kind of more the specifics around distro C or distro D, then moving it up to SIPR for secret and all the way up to JOX for TS layers. So really trying to provide engineers across the entire federal government the tools and the data in the hands at the network that they are trying to do it, so that way it's available for them to do their job. And that's really how we measure our success. We measure success based on whether or not engineers who are doing their jobs are able to have the data and the tools and the time necessary to answer the questions that they are being asked by their leadership. So that's a little bit about kind of what I'm doing in the sphere of this digital engineering modeling and simulation. UAF is a key part of some of that. So like working on the SysML v2 thing, I would imagine, I know we was talking about earlier, some of the transition around UAF and what that looks like given the transition. I'm expecting that there's an opportunity for me to do a similar kind of approach for the SysML, for the UAF v2 transition of working with the OMG team to go, okay, how can I provide some additional resources to really make sure some of the DoD equities are included as we kind of advance. So with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to my partner in success, not partner in crime, partner in success, David McDaniels from the CIO's office, and just talk a little bit about the CIO's perspective, because really the UAF transition, as we kind of look ahead, is both of us working together to achieve that common goal. So Dave, we'll let you come up.
Okay, so the slide here, it kind of shows our digital modernization strategy that's been out for a few years. We've actually been, believe it or not, we've been working on digitization of architectures since 1996, when we developed the first meta model for architecture frameworks called the Core Architecture Data Model. Unfortunately, we used conventional data modeling techniques, and it was hideously complicated. Of the few implementations that we had of it, they weren't interoperable because there was so much semantic redundancy and ambiguity. So about 10 years ago, we brought in this idea of layering. We had an ontology foundation, oops, what's that come from? Ontology foundation layer, common patterns, and then domain patterns. So that's kind of why we're really excited about seeing what's going on with SysML v2, because it's with the kernel foundation and the common patterns about definitions and usage. It kind of is going in that direction, and we think that's a good direction. I can tell you that with the using the layering, we went from 16,000 data elements in the conventional way with the core architecture data model to 250, 2 orders of magnitude less. Okay, let's see. Next. There we go. So when we talk about at the DoD CIO what we use enterprise architectures for, it's not just for system engineering. And you see the bubbles there kind of showing some of the core processes in which we use enterprise architectures in the department. System engineering is definitely one of them. But look, also it's portfolio management, guide investment, guide what ought to be deprecated or divested, and where maybe we need to put more money into things. Also, the long-term budget, the 5-year programming, planning, and budget. Of course, acquisition, the organization that's kind of a sister organization to DAN's, acquisition and sustainment, and then interoperability. So we've had some good successes, over the years with these things, but we have a number of kind of shortfalls, and I kind of listed some of them here. But what we're excited about with digitization is that we think digitization might give us an opportunity for addressing some of those shortcomings and doing better in the future. So in my office, we developed two of the architectures, enterprise architectures for the Department of Defense, 2 of the 4 at the top level, right? The top levels of the warfighting mission area, the defense intelligence mission area. We developed the architectures for the business mission area and the information enterprise mission area. And our vision is, and we hope with digitization, we can get closer to this, is that we can take things like strategic goals and objectives, things that are like in the president's national security strategy, the Secretary of Defense's national defense strategy, and then those flow down into our own strategies. I kind of showed you a little bit about the digital modernization strategy, 4 goals, 17 objectives. And what we do is we take those in our in architecture, we codify those, structure them architecturally, and add to them measures so that we can measure our progress towards achieving those goals and objectives. And then those flow down to successive levels of architecture and system engineering into solutions. And notice that those solutions can be doctrinal. They don't have to be a system. It could be a change to the procedures, the way we do things. It could be organizational. We could do things like business process re-engineering, or we could change the organization. And then you see the other ones there. Training material is definitely in there. Leadership, personnel, and facilities. And so how are we going to help OMG, work with OMG to get this digitization brought into the department? We have a panel that we run called the Enterprise Architecture and Engineering Panel. And so I'll be reporting to them on the 5th of April when we come back from this meeting about what happened here and kind of some of the promising things and maybe some paths ahead. This panel has representatives from 30 of the DoD components, the services, the joint staff, et cetera. And so they will kind of weigh in as to where we think we need improvement. And I'll kind of continue to bring that back to OMG as we work our way through this endeavor. I think that's all I had, Dan. Yep. Thanks for allowing me to come up.
Thanks. Thanks, Dave. I really feel like, so we just really recently reestablished this partnership with the CIO's office of trying to find opportunities where, as we look towards what the future is, how we can help each other and achieve that from a digital engineering, digital transformation side. What does that look like as we talk about architecture frameworks and the CIO's responsibility and really pushing on that across the department? So one of the things I do want to talk about is where I see UAF kind of being used within OUSD R&E. And so there's kind of 2 key areas. So the first is mission engineering. And so once again, so this is Daniel talking, talk to Jamie for more details. I'm going to keep throwing his name out until he finally is forced to come stand up on the stage with me. That's my target. Currently in the mission engineering, as they work on their guidebook, I know there's an update coming on some of that, but they're exploring how to actually start using UAF. They currently have a mission engineering kind of ontology that they've mapped into SysML. So there's some conversations around what does that look like in UAF. So that's definitely a key one when we talk about how we perceive the entire Department of Defense and how we actually think about technology insertions, how we utilize the layering constructs to incorporate some of that. What does that give us? That's one of the key areas. The second key area is the joint architectures for capabilities and systems. So this is a new part of the Systems Engineering and Architecture Executive Directorate that is still in the initial phases. We got the POM funding for it to really start in FY25, so the money come in. So we're still in the initial phases of trying to get it going. But really what we're looking for here is being the kind of system of systems thinking of how we actually ensure architectures fit together at a more kind of guidance level. And so once again, really see this as an opportunity of building our enterprise architectures to demonstrate how an Army system and the Navy system are going to coordinate together. What does it look like when we start bringing in Space Force assets and bringing that story together in kind of a holistic picture? So I firmly believe that the UAF and the capabilities it provides of really shifting us into more using models, being more data focused is critical, because these parts of the organization are only going to succeed if we aren't bounding ourselves to using Microsoft PowerPoint. Oh man, here I am standing up here doing PowerPoint. So that's how they're going to succeed, is they have to use models and data. They can't be bound purely in PowerPoint and Visio. And so that's really where the kind of expectation from the Undersecretary of removing barriers, doing things rapidly, the models and data are going to be critical to that success. So how do we start driving towards that? So the first one, and this is part of that conversation we're having with the CIO's office, we're trying to understand what policies and guidances are out there that still mandate DoDAF. And so if you guys know of any, just write them down on a little sticky note, slide it to me, pass me a little note. We'll see how many things I get. But that's part of the, like, what is out there. We actually just recently went through the JSIDS manual that went through the official review. And so we actually had the opportunity with the CIO's office to put a comment in, and this is actually the language we used. And so this language has actually been reviewed by lawyers. It's vague enough that lawyers are happy, that it lets them lets engineers go off and do it, but it's also vague enough that it doesn't require it too much. So it's kind of that happy middle ground in lawyer speak, which is always a key success. So looking for opportunities for across kind of the DoD of, hey, this is some starting points. Find opportunities where you can include language like this, because if we wait for some future things we're going to be rolling, it's going to be too late. We need to start incorporating this kind of key language early into our products, into our policies and guidance, because well aware of the fact that there's a lot of times that CV2 and SV1 has been written down hard in contracts. And the first thing that's going to come back is when it's like, okay, we want to change it. Close your eyes if you're prime. You always come back and tell us, oh man, well, that's going to be an extra $1 billion. And it's just like, no, hold on. So that's part of, at least we can start planning for future contract language to actually include and educating the contracting workforce to be more UAF focused, to get the data, to get the model, to really drive to the kind of data vision that we all share and really advance that mission. So develop and coordinate training around the use of models. This is the continuing education game. The partnership with DAAU, I think they have a UAF overview kind of thing on some of that. I know a lot of the tool vendors provide training. This is really critical. We need to continue elevating our workforce to incorporate a lot of this training, and that's one of the key things. And then the fourth one is updating contract language. Actually, part of my portfolio is a digital engineering model-based system engineering community of practice. The one coming up so I have one coming up in April that's about digital ecosystems. The one that's coming up in June is actually all about contracting language. And so really trying to come together across the community to go, well, what are people tried with contract language? What are the successes? Where can we find opportunities of, well, great, it turns out the Air Force did it here. Great, let's not reinvent the wheel. I don't like paying for things twice. Let's reuse the language and pass it over to a Navy system. What does it look for contract language around workforce development and things like that? So that's really some of that lessons learned and sharing we need to do. So how do we start working together to kind of do this? Success of the UAF transition across the Department of Defense only works if we succeed through teamwork. If we all keep struggling in our own silos, we're not going to go anywhere. So one is we just need to start. I'm a big fan of doing and sharing and learning, and analyzing a problem is not what the Department of Defense needs. The Secretary of Defense releases his strategic priorities. In it, he talks about how we need to be doing things, timelines need to be reduced. We need to make decisions faster. We need to really drive home and elevate decisions. And so that means that we have to start doing. We can't wait for the perfect solution. There's a lot of boogeymen out there in the kind of the transition around, well, what about this and what about that? Those are boogeymen. We need not to be afraid of some of that. We need to start doing it and learn from one another. And so the second one is start sharing best practices. So the first place I have for sharing best practices, obviously, Kevin over here from just joking with me about best practices, the fact that we should just call them best doing, because if we're going to talk about just doing it, we shouldn't be practicing anymore. We should be doing it. So thank you, Kevin. I will make sure I will scratch that word out and say thanks to Kevin. What? Oh, just do it. Oh, man. See, see now I owe Nike money. Oh, man. So I have two venues kind of for that sharing. So the first one you guys already saw, which was the Digital Engineering Body of Knowledge. The second one I have coming up is it's a 3-day digital engineering summit in October 24th. I have flyers if you're interested. It's called FedDef. It is a federal government-wide community coming together, talking about what people are doing across the entire federal government. So I have partnerships with NASA, DOE, DHS, Coast Guard, all the services, FAA, just sharing and learning from one another. And so that's another opportunity where really looking for the community to go, what are people doing? What are we trying? What is succeeding? What is not working? Where have we failed? There's a lot of opportunities for others to learn from failures, and we need not be afraid of that. And so the third one is, as we think about the role of digital architecture, we drive in that kind of digital thread. And this is one of those that I look at things like SysML and really enabling programs to being board digital. We have the B21, this entirely new system that's all digital and everything. But as we look at that, and not to kind of stretch this analogy too far, I am really looking for programs to be conceived digitally. And so what does that really mean? How do we really look at that high-level enterprise architectures? How do we look at that integrated system of systems architectures? And how do we pull that thread of data all the way back to that early conceptual point? Because that's the story and the opportunities that our leaders are looking for as we kind of advance the mission. So with that, that's my last slide. Here's the generic contact info. If anyone would like any info about FedDef, the Digital Engineering Body of Knowledge, I have a flyer on SENA if you're interested, or just want to talk to me, I am available to chat. And so I believe that there's at least a couple questions, because we got 6 minutes.
Yeah. It's kind of a question. So I'm really excited about your slide that said steps to migrate to UAF. Maybe even update that slide to say migration to digital engineering or model-based systems engineering using UAF. And also really excited about the fact that you're looking at policy, and because I think that's where a lot of people struggle is with the policy. Can you say a little bit more about that?
On the, oh, hold on, I'm getting weird. Let me mute. Is that one? Nope. Hold on, there. Nope. I pressed the button here, guys. I'm sorry. This is what happens when you let government touch computers. No. Oh, it stopped. Okay, there we go. So what was your question? Was around the fact that you feel like this should be updated to digital engineering. I agree. I'm at a UAF talk, so I wanted to put the word UAF on the slides. Yeah. And then your second part of the question was around kind of how do we update policy? Is that kind of what you're driving at a little bit? Yeah. So I have always found that senior leaders are willing to, if given a good enough justification, to write either policy notes or like whatever, where they can go, hey, you don't have to be as strict to this policy. They are willing to do that if you come with them with the case of, hey, look, if we actually were to focus on how to apply proper model-based modeling techniques, look, we're going to have all this additional benefit that really the policy is slowing us down, because at the end of the day, you're just looking for the policy that says, well, did I produce this view? Check. And there's no real brain power into whether or not that's the right thing. So senior leaders are willing to kind of make that. We just got to make the case. That's part of some of the success stories that we're currently capturing right now in the bodies of knowledge, just to kind of help people of like, hey, look, here's how to start thinking about approaching your senior leaders, requesting them to update policy. It's not that you're trying to say, we don't want to follow policy. It's more of follow the spirit of the policy, less the letter of the policy.
Yes, back in '95, I presented an engineering fellowship in Colorado with a block of partners, and force officer. And DARPA had funded a multi-million-dollar program, Smart Catalog, conceived of a carrier system digitally, round trip engineering in about 6 different disciplines. And, you know, we're coming up on 30 years, and I don't really see that commonplace today. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, do you have the opportunity to talk to your leadership very frankly, saying if you're really serious about this, then you will put some strident sort of like, we're going to take options off the table. Like, you can't even have Microsoft Office on your desktop because, you know, we're going to Twins and you're writing directly to the digital model and almost everything is a system. Because when there's choice, then there's discretion and there's no rush.
So the question was about just looking at what technology has happened across. We can look back in time. I always like to sometimes say that I'm trying to get the DoD to adopt the technology of yesterday tomorrow, and so I recognize that it takes a second on that joke. That I can go talk with the automotive industry and the ability that they have to kind of build that entire thread where they are simulating things. We talk about the complexity of the DoD programs, and there's great graphs where it talks about, oh, look, software complexity has gone up. And I argue that like the scale of change of complexity in cars in the automotive industry is probably very similar. But yet for somehow in the DoD, our timelines keep increasing. Yet I can go look at the automotive industry and the timelines for them keeps decreasing. They're able to actually deploy brand new electric cars in now 3 years. Like, that's the kind of power of digital technologies that the industry is able to apply. So that is when I go talk with my senior leaders, is I try to highlight with them those kind of places where industry has addressed it, but it's the DoD's culture, the DoD policy, the kind of color of money challenge we face, that's where we're trying to work on through some of that. There's some other opportunities that we're working on. We're trying to find cases where when we talk with them, we can make the case of the importance of the digital engineering and how that's just part of doing good engineering. But it's one of those that, as I've learned in my conversations with the undersecretary, that she has a big portfolio, and at times she also has to respond to what Congress is talking about. And I have a separate slide that I'll for people later that where Congress right now is talking a lot about more the technology side than they are the engineering side. And so that's just part of the balance where she has to respond to what Congress is talking about. So make sure you write your congressperson to really kind of push the importance of engineering, because they're the driving factor for a lot of this from an OSD side.